So knowing that Longpo Chah is actually like to talk about Venerable Sariputta from time to time, I was looking up teachings of Longpo Chah where he talks about Sariputta and found a talk that's quite good, so I'll read the talk where he talks about Sariputta, but a little bit more of the talk. So, Collected Teachings of Ajahn Chah, page 585. If we think that peace lies where there are no sensations, would wisdom arise? Would there be causal and resultant conditions? Would we have anything to practice with? If we blame the sounds, then where there are sounds, we can't be peaceful. We think that place is no good. Wherever there are sights, we say that it's not peaceful. If that's the case, then to find peace, we'd have to be one whose senses have all died, blind and deaf. I've thought about this. This is strange. Suffering arises because of eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind. So should we be blind? If we didn't see anything at all, maybe that would be better. One would have no defilements arising if one were blind or deaf. Is this the way it is? But thinking about it, it was all wrong. If that was the case, then blind and deaf people would be enlightened. They would all be accomplished if defilements arose at the eyes and ears. There are the causal conditions. Where things arise at the cause, that's where we must stop them. Where the cause arises, that's where we must contemplate. Actually, the sense bases of the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind are all things which can facilitate the arising of wisdom, if we know them as they are. If we don't really know them, we must deny them, saying we don't want to see sights, hear sounds, and so on, because they disturb us. If we cut off the causal conditions, what are we going to contemplate? Think about it. Where would there be any cause and effect? This is wrong thinking on our part. This is why we are taught to be restrained. Restraint is sila. There is the sila of sense restraint. Eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind. These are our sila. They are our samadhi. Reflect on the story of Sariputta. At the time before he became a bhikkhu, he saw Assaji Thera going on alms round. Seeing him, Sariputta thought, "This monk is most unusual. He walks neither too fast nor too slow. His robes are neatly worn. His bearing is restrained." Sariputta was inspired by him, and so approached Venerable Assaji, paid his respects, and asked him, "Excuse me, sir, who are you?" "I am a samana." "Who is your teacher?" "Venerable Gotama is my teacher." "What does Venerable Gotama teach?" "He teaches that all things arise because of conditions. When they cease, it's because the causal conditions have ceased." When asked about the Dhamma by Sariputta, Assaji explained only in brief. He talked about cause and effect. Dhammas arise because of causes. The cause arises first and then the result. When the result is to cease, the cause must first cease. That's all he said, but it was enough for Sariputta. Now, this was a cause for the arising of Dhamma. At that time, Sariputta had eyes, he had ears, he had a nose, a tongue, a body, and a mind. All his faculties were intact. If he didn't have his faculties, would there have been sufficient causes for wisdom to arise for him? Would he have been aware of anything? But most of us are afraid of contact. Either that, or we like to have contact, but we develop no wisdom from it. Instead, we repeatedly indulge through eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind, delighting in and getting lost in sense objects. This is how it is. These sense bases can entice us into delight and indulgence, or they can lead to knowledge and wisdom. They have both harm and benefit, depending on our wisdom. Now let us understand that, having gone forth and having come here to practice, we should take everything as practice. Even the bad things, we should know them all. Why? So that we may know the truth. When we talk of practice, we don't simply mean those things that are good and pleasing to us. That's not how it is. In this world, some things are to our liking, some are not. These things all exist in the world, nowhere else. Usually, whatever we like, we want, even regarding fellow monks and novices. Whatever monk or novice we don't like, we don't want to associate with. We only want to be with those we like, you see? This is choosing according to our likes. Whatever we don't like, we don't want to see or know about. Actually, the Buddha wanted us to experience these things. Loka we do. Look at this world and know it clearly. If we don't know the truth of the world clearly, then we can't go anywhere. Living in the world, we must understand the world. The noble ones of the past, including the Buddha, all lived with these things. They lived in the world among deluded people. They attained the truth right in this very world, nowhere else. They didn't run off to some other world to find the truth. They had wisdom. They restrained their senses, but the practice is to look into all these things and know them as they are. Therefore, the Buddha taught us to know the sense bases, our points of contact. The eye contacts forms and sends them in to become sights. The ears make contact with sounds. The nose makes contact with odors. The tongue makes contact with tastes. The body makes contact with tactile sensations. And so awareness arises. Where awareness arises is where we should look and see things as they are. If we don't know these things as they really are, we will either fall in love with them or hate them. Where these sensations arise is where we can become enlightened, where wisdom can arise. But sometimes we don't want things to be like that. The Buddha taught restraint, but restraint doesn't mean we don't see anything, hear anything, smell, taste, feel, or think anything. That's not what it means. If practitioners don't understand this, then as soon as they see or hear anything, they cower and run away. They don't deal with things. They run away, thinking that by so doing, those things will eventually lose their power over them, that they will eventually transcend them. But they won't. They won't transcend anything like that. If they run away, not knowing the truth of them, later on the same stuff will pop up to be dealt with again. For example, those practitioners who are never content, be they in monasteries, forests, or mountains, wander on Dhutanga pilgrimage, looking at this, that, and the other, thinking they'll find contentment that way. They go, and then they come back. They didn't see anything. They try going to a mountaintop. Ah, this is the spot. Now I'm right. They feel at peace for a few days and then get tired of it. Oh well, off to the seaside. Ah, here it's nice and cool. This'll do me fine. After a while, they get tired of the seaside as well. Tired of the forests, tired of the mountains, tired of the seaside, tired of everything. This is not being tired of things in the right sense. This is not right view. It's simply boredom, a kind of wrong view. Their view is not in accordance with the way things are. When they get back to the monastery, now what will I do? I've been all over and came back with nothing. So they throw away their bowl and disrobe. Why do they disrobe? Because they haven't gotten any grip on the practice. They don't see anything. They go to the north and don't see anything. They go to the seaside, to the mountains, to the forests, and still don't see anything. So it's all finished. They die. This is how it goes. It's because they're continually running away from things. Wisdom doesn't arise. Now take another example. Suppose there is one monk who determines to stay with things and not run away. He looks after himself. He knows himself and also knows those who come to stay with him. He's continually dealing with problems. Take the abbot, for example. If one is an abbot of a monastery, there are constant problems to deal with. There's a constant stream of things that demand attention. Why so? Because people are always asking questions. The questions never end, so you must constantly be on the alert. You are constantly solving problems, your own as well as other people's. You must be constantly awake. Before you can doze off, they wake you up again with another problem. So this causes you to contemplate and understand things. You become skillful. skillful in regard to yourself and skillful in regard to others, skillful in many, many ways. This skill arises from contact, from confronting and dealing with things, not from running away. We don't run away physically, but we run away in our mind, using our wisdom. We understand with wisdom right here. We don't run away from anything. This is a source of wisdom. One must work, must associate with other things. For instance, living in a big monastery like this, we must all help out to look after the things here. Looking at it in one way, you could say that it's all defilement. Living with lots of monks and novices, with many lay people coming and going, many defilements may arise. Yes, I admit. But we must live like this for the development of wisdom and the abandonment of foolishness. Which way are we to go? Are we going to live in order to get rid of foolishness or to increase our foolishness? We must contemplate. Whenever our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, or mind make contact, we should be collected and circumspect. When suffering arises, we should ask, who is suffering? Why did this suffering arise? The abbot of a monastery has to supervise many disciples. Now that may be suffering. We must know suffering when it arises. Know suffering. If we are afraid of suffering and we don't want to face it, where are we going to do battle with it? If suffering arises and we don't know it, how are we going to deal with it? This is of utmost importance. We must know suffering. So the emphasis of Longpo Cha there at the beginning with Sariputta, that the deportment is what drew him to Venerable Assaji, and then he was open to the Dhamma. Continuing on with the chapter in Life of the Buddha, the Two Chief Disciples, page 80. The occasion was this. The Blessed One was staying at Anupiya. There is a town of the Malayans called Anupiya, and by that time many well-known Sakyan princes had gone forth under the Blessed One. But there were two brothers, Mahanama the Sakyan and Anuruddha the Sakyan. Anuruddha had been delicately brought up. He had 3 palaces, one for the summer, one for the rains, and one for the winter. For 4 months he would be entertained in the rains palace by minstrels with no men among them, and never come down from the lower palace. It occurred to Mahanama, now many well-known Sakyan princes have gone forth under the Blessed One, but no one in our family has gone forth from the house life into homelessness. Suppose I went forth, or Anuruddha. Then he went to Anuruddha and told him what had occurred to him. Anuruddha said, "But I have been delicately brought up. I cannot go forth from the home life into homelessness. You go forth." "Come then, Anuruddha, I shall instruct you in the household life. Now first a field must be plowed, then it must be sown, then water must be let into it, then the water must be drained, then the field must be weeded, then the crop must be cut, then it must be gathered in, then it must be stacked, then it must be threshed, then the straw must be removed, then the chaff must be winnowed off, then it must be sifted, then it must be stored away. Now when that is done, it must all be done again next year, and the year after. The work never finishes. There is no end to the work." Then when will there be an end to the work? When shall we have the leisure to gratify the 5 strands of sensual desires we are provided and furnished with? My dear Anuruddha, the work never finishes. There is no end to the work. Our father and our grandfather both died while their work was still unfinished. So now it is for you to learn about this household life. I shall go forth from the home life into homelessness. Anuruddha went to his mother and told her, "Mother, I want to go forth from the home life into homelessness. Please give me your permission." When this was said, she told him, "You 2 sons of mine are dear and precious to me, not repugnant. In case of your death, we should lose you against our will. But why should I give you my permission to go forth from the house life into homelessness while you are still living?" He asked a second and a third time. Then his mother said, "My dear Anuruddha, if Bhaddiya, the royal Sakyan who is governing the Sakyans, goes forth, you may do so too." Now Bhaddiya, the royal Sakyan who was governing the Sakyans at that time, was a friend of Anuruddha's, and his mother had thought, "This Bhaddiya is a friend of Anuruddha's. He is not anxious to go forth from the home life," which is why she had spoken as she did. Then Anuruddha went to Bhaddiya and said, "My going forth depends on yours. If your going forth depends on mine, then let it no longer be so. You and I will go forth when you like. Come, let us go forth together from the house life into homelessness. I cannot. I will do anything else for you that I can. You go forth." My mother has said, "My dear Anuruddha, if Bhaddiya, the royal Sakyan who is governing the Sakyans, goes forth, you may go forth too." And your words were these, "If your going forth depends on mine, then let it no longer be so. You and I will, well, you go forth when you like. Come, let us both go forth from the home life into homelessness." At that time, people used to speak the truth, used to keep their word. Bhaddiya told Anuruddha, "Wait 7 years. At the end of 7 years, both of us shall go forth." 7 years is too long. I cannot wait 7 years. Wait 6 years. At the end of 6 years, both of us shall go forth. 6 years is too long. I cannot wait 6 years. Wait 5 years, 4, 3, 2 years, 1 year, 7 months, 2 months, 1 month. Wait half a month. At the end of half a month, both of us shall go forth. Half a month is too long. I cannot wait half a month. Wait 7 days. At the end of 7 days, both of us shall go forth, and so I can hand over the kingdom to my children and my brothers. 7 days is not too long. I shall wait. Then Bhaddiya, the royal Sakyan, and Anuruddha, and Ananda, and Bhagu, and Kimbila, and Devadatta, with Upali the barber as seventh, set out leading a 4-constituent army, as though to the parade ground in the pleasure park, as they were used to do. When they had gone some distance, they dismissed the army. Then they went across the border to another realm, where they took off their insignia. They rolled them up in an upper robe, and they told Upali the barber, "Upali, you had better go back. There is enough here for you to live on." Now on his way, Upali thought, "These Sakyans are fierce. With this, they might even have me put to death as an abettor in the princes going forth. So these Sakyan princes are now going forth, but how about me?" He opened the bundle and hung the things on a tree, saying, "Let him who sees these take them as given." Then he went back to the Sakyan princes. They saw him coming, and they asked him, "Why have you returned?" He told them what had happened, and he added, "And so I have come back again." "You did well not to go home, Upali, for the Sakyans are fierce. With this, they might even have had you put to death as an abettor in the Sakyan princes going forth." Then the Sakyan princes went with Upali the barber to the Blessed One, and after paying homage to him, they sat down at one side. When they had done so, they said to the Blessed One, "Lord, we are proud Sakyans. This Upali the barber has long attended on us. Let the Blessed One give him the going forth first, so that we can pay homage to him and rise up for him and give him reverential salutation and honor. Thus the Sakyan pride will be humbled in us Sakyans." Then the Blessed One gave the going forth first to Upali the barber and afterwards to the Sakyan princes. It was in the course of that rainy season that the Venerable Bhaddiya realized the 3 true knowledges. The Venerable Anuruddha aroused the divine eye. The Venerable Ananda realized the fruition of stream entry. Devadatta produced the ordinary man's supernormal powers. At this time, whenever the Venerable Bhaddiya went into the forest or to the root of a tree or to a room that was void, he was constantly exclaiming, "Oh, bliss! Oh, bliss!" A number of bhikkhus went to the Blessed One and told him about it, adding, "There seems no doubt, Lord, that the Venerable Bhaddiya is leading the holy life dissatisfied, or he is remembering his former position as a ruler." Then the Blessed One sent for him and asked him if it was true. It is so, Lord. But, Bhadia, what good do you see in doing this? Formerly, Lord, when I had royal status, there was a well-posted guard both inside and outside the palace, and also both inside and outside the city, and also both inside and outside the district. Even though I was so guarded and protected, I was fearful, anxious, suspicious, and worried. But now, Lord, when I am gone to the forest or to the foot of a tree or to an empty hut, I am not fearful or anxious or suspicious or worried. I live at ease, in quiet, dependent on others' gifts, with a mind like a wild deer. This is the good that I see in doing this. Knowing the meaning of this, the Blessed One then uttered this exclamation: who has no longer conflict lurking in him will have surmounted all the kinds of being, for he is fearless, blissful, free from sorrow. No deity can vie with him in glory. Now the Venerable Nanda, the Blessed One's half-brother, put on pressed and ironed robes, and he anointed his eyes and took a glazed bowl. Then he went to the Blessed One, and after paying homage to him, he sat down at one side. When he had done so, the Blessed One told him, Nanda, it is not proper that you, a clansman who has gone forth out of faith from the house life into homelessness, should put on pressed and ironed robes, anoint your eyes, and take a glazed bowl. What is proper for you, a clansman who has gone forth out of faith from the house life into homelessness, is to be a forest dweller, an eater only of alms food got by begging, a wearer of refuse rag robes, and to dwell without regard for sensual desires. Meanwhile, the novice Rahula, now 11 years old, was living under the elder Sariputta's care at Ambalatika, near Rajagaha, where the Buddha returned in due course. Thus I heard, at one time the Blessed One was living at Rajagaha in the bamboo grove, the squirrel's sanctuary, and the Venerable Rahula was living at Ambalatika. When it was evening, the Blessed One rose from retreat, and he went to the Venerable Rahula at Ambalatika. The Venerable Rahula saw him coming, and he prepared a seat for him and water for washing his feet. The Blessed One sat down on the seat prepared and washed his feet. The Venerable Rahula then paid homage to him and sat down at one side. The Blessed One poured a small quantity of water into the water dipper, and he addressed the Venerable Rahula thus: Rahula, do you see this small quantity of water in this water dipper? Yes, Lord. Unless people are careful to avoid knowingly telling lies, there is as little good in them as this. Then the Blessed One threw the small amount of water away, and he asked, Rahula, did you see that small amount of water I threw away? Yes, Lord. Unless people are careful to avoid knowingly telling lies, the good there is in them is thrown away like this. Then the Blessed One turned the water dipper upside down, and he asked, Rahula, do you see this water dipper turned upside down? Yes, Lord. Unless people are careful to avoid knowingly telling lies, the good there is in them is treated like this. Then the Blessed One turned the water dipper right way up again, and he asked, Rahula, do you see this water dipper now quite empty? Yes, Lord. Unless people are careful to avoid knowingly telling lies, they are quite as empty of good as this. Now, Rahula, suppose there were a royal tusker elephant with tusks as long as chariot poles, full-grown in stature, highly bred and well used to battles, and in battle he used his forefeet and his hind feet and his forequarters and his hindquarters and his head and his ears and his tusks and his tail, and yet he kept his trunk back. Then the man on his back would think, though he uses all his limbs, he keeps his trunk back, and so he has not yet devoted his life to the king. But as soon as he used all his limbs and his trunk as well, then the man on his back would think, he used all his limbs and also his trunk, and so he has now devoted his life to the king. He needs no more training. So too, Rahula, Unless people are careful to avoid knowingly telling lies, I do not say of them that they need no more training. So, Rahula, you must train yourself never to speak of falsehood, even for a joke. What do you think a looking glass is for, Rahula? To look at oneself in, Lord. In just the same way, you should keep on looking at your acts of body, acts of speech, and acts of mind. The Buddha then went on to give him detailed instructions how to review every action before, during, and after its performance, judging it to be unwholesome if he found it to lead to his own harm, or to that of others, or to that of both, judging it to be wholesome if it did not, and shaping future action accordingly. And then one more. Ajahn Chah talks about Venerable Assaji again in another place in the Collected Teachings. This is from the book, from the talk Toilets on the Path, a famous Korwat talk given by Luang Por Chah. It's in the Collected Works, page 737. As for proclaiming the Dhamma, you don't have to do very much. Some of the Buddha's disciples, like Venerable Assaji, hardly spoke. They went on alms round in a calm and peaceful manner, walking neither too quickly nor slowly, dressed in somber-colored robes. Whether walking, moving, going forward or back, they were measured and composed. One morning, while Venerable Sariputta was still the disciple of a Brahmin teacher called Sanjaya, he caught sight of Venerable Assaji and was inspired by his demeanor. He approached him and requested some teaching. He asked who Venerable Assaji's teacher was and received the answer, the Reverend Gotama. What does he teach that enables you to practice like this? He doesn't teach so much. He simply says that all dhammas arise from causes. If they are to cease, their causes must cease first. Just that much. That was enough. He understood. That was all it took for Venerable Sariputta to realize the Dhamma. Whereas many of you go on alms round as if you were a bunch of boisterous fishermen going out to catch fish. The sounds of your laughing and joking can be heard from far away. Most of you just don't know what's what. You waste your time thinking of irrelevant and trivial things. Every time you go on alms round, you can bring back a lot of Dhamma with you. Sitting here eating the meal, too, many kinds of feelings arise. If you are composed and restrained, you'll be aware of them. You don't have to sit cross-legged in meditation for these things to occur. You can realize enlightenment in ordinary, everyday life. Or do you want to argue the point? Once you've removed a piece of burning charcoal from the fire, it doesn't cool straight away. Whenever you pick it up, it's hot. Mindfulness retains its wakefulness in the same way as charcoal does its heat. Self-awareness is still present. That being so, how could the mind become deluded? Maintain a concerted gaze on your mind. That doesn't mean staring at it unblinkingly like a madman. It means constantly tracking your feelings. Do it a lot. Concentrate a lot. Develop it a lot. This is called progress. You don't know what I mean by this gazing at the mind, this kind of effort and development. I'm talking about knowing the present state of your mind. If lust or ill will or whatever arise in your mind, then you have to know all about it. In practice, the mind is like a child crawling about, and the sense of knowing is like the parent. The child crawls around in the way that children do, and the parent lets it wander, but, all the same, keeps a constant eye on it. If the child looks like it's going to fall in a pit, down a well, or wander into danger in the jungle, the parent knows. This type of awareness is called the one who knows, the one who is clearly aware, the radiant one. The untrained mind doesn't understand what's going on. Its awareness is like that of a child. Knowing there's craving in the mind and not doing anything about it, knowing that you're taking advantage of somebody else, eating more than your share, knowing how to lift lightweight and let someone else take the heavy one, knowing that you've got more than the other person, that's an insane kind of knowing. Selfish people have that kind of knowing. It turns the clarity of awareness into darkness. A lot of you tend to have that kind of knowing. Whatever feels heavy, you push it away and go off looking for something light instead. That kind of knowing. We train our minds as parents look after their children. You let the children go their way, but if they're about to put a hand in the fire, fall down the well, or get into danger, you're ready. Who could love a child more than its parents? Because parents love their children, they watch over them continually. They have constant awareness in their minds, which they continually develop. The parent doesn't neglect the children, but neither do they keep right on top of them all the time. Because children lack knowledge of the way things are, the parent has to watch over them, keep track of their movements. When it looks like they're going to fall down the well, their mother picks them up and carries them somewhere far from danger. Then the parent goes back to work, but continues to keep an eye on the children and keeps consciously training this knowledge and awareness of their movements. When they run toward the well again, their mother picks them up and returns them to a safe place. Raising up the mind is the same. If that wasn't the case, then how could the Buddha look after you? Buddho means the one who knows, who is awakened and radiant. If your awareness is that of a small child, how could you be awake and radiant? You'll just keep putting your hand in the fire. If you know your mind but don't train it, how could that be intelligence? Worldly knowledge means cunning, knowing how to hide your mistakes, knowing how to get away with things. That's what the world says is good. The Buddha disagreed. I'll leave it there. If there's any questions, we have 10 minutes.
In the first reading from Ajahn Chah, he mentioned some of the ways that we can learn from taking on responsibilities, like being an abbot and so forth. This is a question for all of the senior monks here that, what are some lessons you've learned from taking on responsibilities and, leading communities? And then what were some qualities that you found prepared you well for taking those on?
Okay.
I don't think anything actually prepared me. But there's no, I'll get it all down and figure it all out, and I'll take on responsibility and how it works, and just sort of by taking on responsibilities, but then using it as an object of contemplation and reflection in terms of what does my mind do, what is the underlying tendency to retreat into, say, fear, anxiety, worry. Where do I get defensive and irritated, but stimulates kind of desire and see, and recognizing that none of that stops because sometimes you can bring it into abeyance just by being on one's own and not having contact with people, but it's actually, it's still there in the mind. So it's so being able to use it as a contemplation. So there's probably two qualities I think that are really essential for growth in practice and in Dhamma. And of course this goes whether one takes responsibility or not. And that's humility and patience. Are qualities one takes oneself too seriously, too worried what people think or reactions, then you get tangled up, and then also if one is kind of impatient or unwilling to be, because patience is kind of like a willingness, a readiness to be with what one's experiencing as an object of attention, as opposed to a kind of a judgment on your kind of stupidity and incapabilities, which is there's so much self involved, and so it's being able to see it as a shining a light on areas that one can learn from. So then one is whatever one's taking on, or we can, especially in Western culture and American culture in particular, we can be incredibly competitive, and so then that kind of comparing and competition, that feeling of it, is it's suffering, and so being able to, it's not just being recognizing that if it's there, we're not really going to be free until we learn it as an illustration of dukkha and of the Four Noble Truths. So that's being able to pick it up as an object of reflection.
I would agree that nothing prepares you, it's just you have to do it. But then if you never do it, you never learn.
Yeah.
So it's like that idea of like not thinking like I have to not make a mistake. That's the most important thing, but that's impossible.
Yeah.
To not make a mistake.
It's just you have to be ready to make mistakes, do things wrong, get the fall into very obvious traps. Not, and it's like stuff why did I expect people to be why do I get irritated by that? Why do I get offended by that? They've all, human beings have always been like that. Not beating yourself up because of it. It's okay, yeah. You just get up and go for it again.
From experience, I can see that the Kubraja usually start out young, very serious, and then gradually lots of humors and things change. That one policy, isn't it?
Yeah, you get it beaten out of you.
All the things that both of you said resonate with me as well, in terms of patience and self-forgiveness and those qualities. And I think about practical skills, because I think what's most draining is for me like going back to the kuti at the end of the day, all the stuff that goes through processes, and with the skills that I found most helpful in dealing with that and preventing that is just really taking the time to listen really carefully to people. Really just to really try and understand where somebody's coming from, rather than jumping to conclusions or jumping to assumptions and speaking too quickly and acting too quickly. Because that's where the regrets come later in the day.
Yeah.
And then also kind of along with that is just really being careful with speech, and not saying something that one's going to regret later in a moment. Because things happen so fast in the role of leadership,
Yes, and that the old sort of foot in mouth disease.
Yeah, like one thing I've learned is like anything I say, I have to think. I shouldn't say this if I don't want the whole community to know it. So like, then I just shouldn't say it. So it's like something you just learn. But also it's like kindness, that ability to develop kindness. And like I was thinking about Luang Por Chah when I was reading this talk, organizing it, and it was like he took this like practice on of receiving lines of people at a certain point. It was just like all day long receiving people at his kuti, and like I was thinking, why did he do that? And just it's almost like he may have actually not only was it incredible metta, but it was like he was like honing his wisdom also, in terms of like being able to answer anybody's questions, the whole range of people, no matter what they were coming at him with. The Dhamma was so strong that he was able to counter anything with the Dhamma.
It's one of the things he said, is that, my practice was very strong before I began to lead a community. But it wasn't until after leading community for some time, that my wisdom became strong. So it's really interesting, how he made that distinction. So, he did have an incredible practice, but it was just those very, on a certain level, mundane interactions and duties and being present with different situations that really were a catalyst for his wisdom.